Welcome and good morning, everybody. Great to see actually some familiar faces here as well. I can see a few people that I have seen before, so fantastic to have everybody in the session today. I'm really excited to kind of go through and share some of the things that we've been doing and working incredibly hard at in Resilient Pilot as well. I'll introduce myself in just a second, but what I'll do first of all is I'll just kind of go into sharing my screen just to kind of get us going so we can kind of start with what it is that we're going to be physically doing in the session this morning. What I am going to say though is keep your eyes peeled in this session today. I've got a little bit of a quiz for you at the end and it's going to sort of see and show just how much maybe you've kind of listened and what sort of information you've taken in as well. But I'm going to keep you busy in this session as well. So please don't think you're just necessarily going to be sitting there with your feet up or answering your emails. I'm going to be keeping you pretty busy. So, Resilient Pilot. Well, what are we? This is exactly what it is I'm going to share with you, and where was it that we have come from? And of course, what is it that we are doing now? How are we transforming? So I'll start to tell you a little bit about the organisation and who we are, and a little bit of a timeline as well. But please feel free to get involved in this session. There's lots of tools available. So there's things like chats, there's annotation tools, for instance, so there's the reactions buttons as well. So please, as we kind of work through, I'm going to really encourage you to get involved as well. But let me just introduce myself first of all. My name is Sam Sloan. I live in Cheshire. And if you haven't already, if you don't know anything about me, I'm an aviation nut. You will generally find me somewhere around an airport doing some various different tasks, whether it's be flying a plane myself, which I'm still in the process of learning, or whether I will be watching them from the ground. I am one of the directors in Resilient Pilot. I'm the Director of Training and Development. So I develop the mentors and the coaches that come through to us so we can support the aviation professionals. And that's expanding, which again, I'll explain in a little bit more detail. Stuart is the CEO and the founder, or one of the founders of Resilient Pilot. Him and Karen Barth in March 2020 created Resilient Pilot, and we were incorporated in the May. But I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. Claire is a EasyJet captain. She's got incredible amounts of experience, and she is the Director of Planning and Strategy, and we would be completely lost without her. Lee Mahoney is the Director of Business Development. He's an A380 captain for Emirates Airlines. And Johanna Hooper is ex-Navy, and she's the Director of Strategy and Development as well. Stuart, the founder, is also an A380 Senior First Officer with British Airways. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen Michael McIntyre. He's also known as the Singing Pilot as well. So get yourselves on YouTube and watch Michael McIntyre and that episode where Stuart is on that particular, I think it's The Unexpected Star, I think it's called, if I remember rightly. So that's a little bit about our team, but my background, leadership development for many years. I was a leader of people for about 20 odd years, and then I moved into the corporate space where I moved into L&D about 15 years ago. And that's where my, I suppose, coaching and mentoring official pathway and journey kind of started. And then back in 2018, I got my accreditation with the EMCC as well, or started that process. Love the EMCC. I just love the fluidity of everything that it provides. And I'll talk about how exactly it is that as Resilient Pilot, we have also gained our ISMCP accreditation within 2 years of us being born, which, can I just say, quite frankly, took some work. So our journey and purpose, how did we come about? Well, I think we all know only too well what happened in sort of February, March of 2020. Aviation was decimated, to say the least. There was nothing flying. All of the aircraft were parked up. There was very, very limited anything going on at all. It just literally stopped almost overnight. So when Stuart, being an A380 pilot, and he had been for many, many years, he started to recognise what was going on for him. And the change all of a sudden in his lifestyle And of course, his career had literally stopped on a dime. So he approached Karen and they started to recognise actually there was a need for this, and what is it that we needed to do to support aviation professionals, not just pilots, but crew, ground staff, baggies handlers, you name it, right the way across the whole playing field. So that was when we decided, or Stu decided, to incorporate the business. But he had a vision. He didn't just want to do it, because initially, actually, we thought we'd only be around for about 6 months, get aviation back, if you like, in the air, and kind of, peter out. But that didn't happen at all. And we started to recognise, actually, there was a much bigger picture here. So our vision eventually kind of led into what it is that you can see on the screen here. We've ended up now wanting and are wanting to be a virtual evidence-based mentoring and coaching and training organisation. Not that we train or license pilots, but nonetheless, we want to develop the human, very technical and very process-driven piloting, shall we say. And I think sometimes the human side can also almost be put to one side because it's very kind of technical skills. But what about the person? What happens to them? And if they're working at their optimum performance, surely that's going to make them be a better pilot or better crew or better engineer, whatever it is. So when we start to think about what happened to aviation, it wasn't just aviation that was impacted. This is where I'd like you guys to kind of get involved. Please feel free to sort of pop into chat now. So what other industries were impacted similarly that literally stopped overnight? Just pop that into chat for me, just so we can kind of see maybe your industry was impacted directly, whatever industry it is that you were in. Again, pop that in and sort of explain that maybe that's your industry. Hospitality, absolutely. Hospitality, literally, pubs, restaurants, bars closed. Entertainment industry as well, Claire, definitely. Veronica's there saying our face-to-face coaching, training and facilitation. Brilliant. That's another great example, because I've been in the online space in training and development for 10 years. So we just converted all of our material and carried on. But there were so many organisations that didn't know how to do that effectively. So that's a brilliant point. Events and conferencing, fantastic, Sean. Non-profit, yeah. And we've got Martin there saying they're face-to-face training and consulting. I mean, that's just a drop in the ocean, isn't it? There were so many schools, brilliant. Yeah, Nicola, higher education changed to online. So we saw universities literally picking up material and dropping it into the online space and then wonder why it hadn't quite had the impact that they were expecting it to do. Surely it was the same content. It needs to be done slightly differently in this space. And again, we can talk about that in a little while. Shopping, Eileen. Love that. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't go out for a bit of retail therapy. No, we couldn't. Amazon got battered. I know one thing, there was sick to death of probably ordering things to my door during the pandemic. We had physical training and sports in person. Brilliant. So people like Joe Wicks all of a sudden was on the TV, wasn't he, in the morning? I don't know if did anybody do the Joe Wick stuff in the morning? Just raise your hand if you did. I know I certainly did. I've got me lycra on in the morning and got myself up and got myself doing a bit of Joe Wicks before the day started. Absolutely. Office connectivity, definitely. Well, that changed completely. 180. It was like, hang on a minute, how do I now manage my teams? We're still training a lot of individuals. It's a huge hot topic, the hybrid leadership, for instance, still causing big problems. Difficult for workplace inductions everywhere. Some people have never physically met their teammates other than maybe on a Teams or a Zoom call. So it decimated a lot of industries. And quite frankly, there was a lot of sort of frailing around where people just simply didn't know what to do or how to approach the new world that we were learning about. So really, really great examples there. So we know that a lot of industries were impacted. So I've got another question for you here. Told you I was going to keep you busy, didn't I? So let me just put some lines in there just to break the question up. Some industries actually flourished. Now, they certainly did, Esther, which actually supposedly kind of links into this. So think about the industries that did flourish, but also what did we see from them to respond and diversify to support their people? Because you're absolutely right. So even things like shopping, for instance, like I said before, Amazon, etc., went through the roof. Online food shopping, for instance, even Aldi started to do like the Deliveroo collections. They didn't want to do online shopping at all. They never wanted to go down that line, but they did. Hospitality, what did we see them doing? They were doing like cook-alongs and, you know, all of a sudden collections where they'd never done that before. I remember going to a restaurant and sitting outside because we'd ordered it, and sitting outside in the car and eating it rather than taking it home when we could eventually go out and sort of pick the food up. Yeah, Martin's there saying, you know, we went online. Zoom literally zoomed. It went from 20 million users to over 300 million users almost instantly. It was like, wow, incredible amounts of, you know, learning for everybody as well. Never mind the platform providers, shall we say. Home haircutting. Yeah. Who had a home haircut? How good was it? Oh, yes, absolutely. We can see a few hands up here. Yeah, a few shaved heads when things had kind of gone wrong, and that was just the girls. What can I say? But you know what I mean. But yeah, we did. We saw some horrendous haircuts. Eventually, finally, we got to a real hairdresser. Manufacturer's lateral flow test. Yeah, now think about that. Absolutely, that went through the roof as well, didn't it? Telehealth and ACT online, yeah, brilliant. Online concerts, there was loads of online concerts and quizzes. Did anybody attend an online quiz? I attended a few online quizzes, yeah, absolutely. They were a bit of fun at the very beginning. I think they got a bit laborious after a while, but nonetheless, we did loads of that. A lot about well-being. Now, brilliant. Now, this is actually where it starts to link about with what it was that we were doing, because we recognised actually the pilot's mental health was going to be detrimentally affected. Well, that's exactly the gap we wanted to plug. So that was brilliant. Ganda's there saying online shopping, workshops, yeah, Instagram, Zoom teams, definitely. I don't think in the 10 years I've worked in this space, I've never known a platform have so many updates and listen to their customers like Zoom has. They've been fantastic, I've got to say. Online concerts, online funerals, yeah, weddings as well. So I don't know, virtual weddings. I know my son got married just when they'd released it and we could only have 15 people there. There should have been 100 people there. So that, again, sort of changed things. Churches, funeral homes, yeah. There's far too many, yeah. Distribution of rum-filled calendar for a pub. Like the sound of that. Tailoring vans to come to your home, yeah, lovely. Moving house. Did anybody move house? I moved house in June 2021. Property went through the roof. I think everybody wanted a bigger property because all of a sudden they were thinking, I can't really work from the dining room table in the kitchen. It's not working with the kids. There was loads of people wanted to move. Yeah, one-on-one calls, childcare. Walk and talk on the phone with a colleague, brilliant. Look at how much changed, and look at actually how we diversified to support the people as well. Happy hours, breakfasts, fantastic. At home afternoon tea for a nice restaurant, definitely. We saw a massive boom on things like Instagram and Facebook offering various different services from people. It really got people thinking that cliche out of the box, but you know what? We did, because we had to do that through necessity. Now, we didn't have to set up Resilient Pilot, but what would have happened if we didn't? What else or who else would have come into the fold? Now, don't get me wrong, the airlines were supporting the people. Of course they were. Some airlines were better than others, just like some organisations were better than others at supporting their people. But we wanted to make sure that actually the pilots were still fit for purpose when they came back to the job. Because, of course, well, like, you know, quite a lot of industries, it's incredibly important. It holds an awful lot of responsibility. So supporting the people was, to us, and almost, it was a given. That was just what we needed to do. Okay, so let's just have a look at the timeline. So, and I'll whiz through this. I'm not going to go through this in any detail. Online medical consultancy. I'm loving how these are still coming through, because there's so much, isn't there, when we still think about it. Like I said, March 2020, Stu approached Karen, and that was where it was all stemmed from. That's where it was all born. We used to do Wednesday webinars. We did them every week. They've dropped off a little bit now. People have got busier. We saw the attendance dropping, but nonetheless, we were really pleased that people were getting back to work. But we did Wednesday webinars, and they're still available on our website as well, which I'll share with you a little bit later. We're incorporated as a not-for-profit organisation in the July 2020. I actually joined in the June 2020. Just to support from a coaching and mentoring perspective. I never thought for a second I'd end up upskilling all of the mentors that came into the organisation. We got our first sort of DWP funding in the September of 2020, and we then supported pilots getting back, upskilling themselves, shall we say, or we were helping to upskill them, and we got some funding to help with that, because I don't know if you're aware, but the pilot licensing goes across quite a lot of various different elements, and that costs money to keep themselves current, and we got some funding to help pilots with that. The core team were set up in the January of 2021, and I was part of that. But we've completely, how can I say, grown the organisation organically, but also kind of had a direction of travel that we felt we've needed to look at and follow because of what we were recognised within the organisation, within the industry. In February 2021, we started to accredit our first EIA individuals. So we were accrediting coaches and mentors to make sure that, one, we had consistency. Two, yes, some of them were highly experienced pilots, for instance, or of course, other people like myself that weren't physically a pilot that had come and joined. Well, how did we know that they were coaching and mentoring correctly, shall we say, and that they were a safe pair of hands for our mentees and our coachees? So we started to accredit, and that was some of the programs that I was running for them. By 2021, February, we had 70 mentors as well. So it started to grow quite quickly. In the May of 2021, we started to accredit the organisation, not just the individuals within the organisation, but the whole thing. And we started down that path. And then by the second birthday, which was May 2022, we'd actually accredited. So it took us 12 months to gain the ISMCP Gold. Please feel free if anybody who's got any questions in regards to the ISMCP, but we will look at that in a little bit more detail in a little while. One other thing that we started to recognise as well, that being a coach and a mentor was great, absolutely fantastic, and we'll look at something in just a moment, because we wanted to wear many different hats, and that was only two. We wanted to facilitate training. We wanted to train them and to start to recognise skills fade and rust, and of course to plug things like knowledge gaps, which was actually impeding confidence when they were getting back into the cockpit. So we started to train our mentors as CBTIs as well, which means that they could then train on the competency-based scenarios, because pilots have 9 competencies as well. Just like the EMCC has 8, the pilots have 9. So we started to do that as well. Second birthday, May 2022. And then this is kind of bringing us up to date, really. We've just secured some funding now in January 2023 to start to look at from year 7 to year 11 for the next gen aviator as well. And we've just got that from the Department for Transport to start to look at, well, who are the next aviation professionals that want to come in? And we've already ran 12 within 12 schools where we go in and we deliver sort of like a little mini session in regards to, well, the day in the life of a pilot. What is it that they need to do? And of course, we talk about things like engineers, ground staff, sort of cabin crew, etc., all of those types of things. And we sort of invite them then, if they do have an appetite, a genuine appetite, to become the next gen aviators, because it's not just about being pilots, it's actually a whole holistic thing about the industry. Esther said there, did you use coaching principles to train, or did you use traditional teaching concepts? No, absolutely. So the whole program, the program that I wrote is called Coaching with Purpose, and that's an EMCC accredited program. And you're basically coached all of the way through it. It's quite a challenging program, but really equips you with all of the basic skills. It's only a foundation program, but it actually equips you with all of the skills that you need to coach and mentor effectively. It's quite a journey, shall we say. And we've had some incredible feedback off the back of that. But we've literally just written, it probably should be on there actually, I've just written a new EMCC EIA program as well, which is completely for resilient pilot mentors. And I'll show you a little bit about that in just a few moments as well. That's a great question, Esther. As I answered your question, Esther, just let me know if it has in chat. So where are we now? We've still got around about 70 mentors. Some came, some went. We've probably got slightly more actually now. Some went back to the industry. They simply didn't have time to continue with us. That was great, and we've gained some more. So it's kind of leveled at around about 70 for now. But we've got probably even more followers now actually on LinkedIn as well, just over 8,000 followers. But about 300 mentees and coaches and about 5,000 members as well. So we're still supporting a lot of individuals, but we're now talking and getting involved in a lot more of the larger organisations, shall we say, when it comes to aviation, and kind of keep your eyes peeled, I should say, on the things that we're going to be posting more in the very near future on LinkedIn, for instance. Oh, thank you, Nicola. That's lovely. Thank you for popping that in. Yeah, that's my programme. And we've just written one, like I've said, which is just getting the accreditation, actually. It's just been submitted for the accreditation, which is the EIA, specifically for resilient pilot. Does the same things. There's an awful lot of very similarities, but we actually incorporate the induction as well into resilient pilot within it. So what's unique then about resilient pilot? Well, this is what I was talking about just a few moments ago. Probably links as well, actually, to Esther's question, because when we train the mentors and the coaches, this is pretty much the model that we use. Now, this model originally came from Hector, and I can't pronounce, Lazoa, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his surname, but this is, when I wrote the programme, what I wanted to kind of achieve from it. In fairness, it was achieving it anyway. I just needed to get it down on paper. Because as a coach and as a facilitator, there's lots of pull, there's lots of questions, there's lots of thoughts, there's lots of reflection. And that's exactly how I train the mentors. There's very little tell, if we're honest. There's, of course, knowledge gap filling, of course there is, which I suppose you could call that training. But nonetheless, the vast majority of it is high facilitation with quite a large element of coaching right the way through the programs. The mentoring, I suppose, traditionally we start to see as more of a push style. So it's a little bit more of a tell and sort of sharing experiences. That's the very definition of a mentor, of course it is. However, in Resilient Pilot, what we don't want to do is just have that mentor sitting there just sharing their experiences, because that's theirs. Great as they may be and useful as they are, we want to mentor with a coaching approach. We want to seek first to understand. We need that mentor to be able to recognise the needs of that particular mentee or coachee. If it's a coachee, that goes without saying, but certainly the mentees. And we take that approach of pull first. So we want to make sure that we're asking lots of questions, and that then forms that relationship, I think, at a much deeper level. So they can tailor we never give advice ever, but they can tailor their experiences and what they share from an insight perspective specifically to that person. And that is very important to us, that they take that approach. Hence why we wanted to train them very early on in the organisation, because we recognise that even though the very definition of a mentor is to share, it's not just about that. It's not about them, it's about the coachee and the mentee. So this is the model that we use now. So you might be able to see here at the very, very top, the group facilitation and the training that's taking place. I'm going to share with you what it is that we're doing about that in just a few moments after we've gone into our first breakout room. And this is where we train the CBTIs. Like I said before, this is the competency-based scenarios, or the competency-based training instructors. So that's about the group facilitation. And of course, there's an element of training in there. And I'll share with you a little video about that in just a moment. But the individual accreditations accredit them through the EMCC in the EIA at foundation level from a coaching and mentoring perspective. And we see the typical stuff when they come onto the training, irrelevant of how many years mentoring experience they may have, they still have a high tell style, shall we say. So once they've gone through the programme, that completely switches 180. So it's a very much ask style, which is exactly, I feel, the best way to get, well, the best out of the individual. Andrew's saying there, could you give a few examples of what topics mentors are coaching, were coaching pilots on, please? So a lot of the individuals that come through to us are cadet pilots. So they not necessarily have their first job. Some of them do, some of them don't. So we have two areas that we do. We have a pilot mentor. So you could choose a pilot that you could go to that maybe you're looking for some, I don't know, CV writing experience, for instance, or some sim experience. So they have to go into a sim every 6 months. And they have to demonstrate those competencies within the sim, those 9 competencies that I mentioned before. So they may want to go and speak specifically to a pilot about those. And again, it's not just about, well, when I did a sim, I did this. It's actually, what is it that you feel at the moment that you're lacking, for instance, and take that coaching approach. But we also have the pilot mentors and we have performance coaches. So the performance coaches, which is I'm one of them, they could, and I do quite regularly, coach and mentor on things like mindset and behaviours and their approach and recognising things like self-awareness, for instance. So I'll give you one example. One of my mentees was having severe anxiety issues when he was flying the aircraft, and on the debrief, not flying the aircraft, let me clarify that. On the debrief, he was having real anxiety issues in regards to putting himself down. He was only recognising what he hadn't done well. So we started to look at where that was coming from, how that was helping him, etc. And we looked at some approaches and some, I can't think of the word, begins with S. It'll come back to me in a minute. Strategies, there we go. Some strategies that would help him stop doing that because it was really hindering him. And that's exactly what he did. Completely transformed how he felt, not only about the debrief, but actually about him in the cockpit. He was now focused on, well, if I did something wrong, okay, I did something wrong. So what? What I've learned from it. And it wasn't eating him up like it was before. So made a huge difference to him. No problem. That's fine. I've just had a direct message from somebody. That's okay. So that would be, just as an example, a couple of topics. But the two, we have the pilot mentors and we also have the performance coaches, which look at, well, it could be things like loss and grief, for instance. How do they manage that? You know, what's going on maybe in relationships. And we have various different performance coaches as well. We're just in the process, actually, of updating all of our website in regard to how they can now select the mentors too. So that's the model that we use. And it's working brilliantly. And one of the things that, again, Stu's really passionate about is making sure that taking that approach, what does that really do as an outcome? What are we actually getting by taking that approach? Because what we were finding was, like I said earlier, they'd have a sim or they'd have some kind of training intervention and their knowledge would be really high. But then in those 6 months, it kind of drops off. What are they doing in those 6 months between the sims, for instance? Well, yeah, they are upskilling themselves to some degree. But we started to see fade and rust and, of course, confidence and abilities coming in to play when they were getting in the sims. So how did we alleviate that? Because what we wanted to do was flatten that line out. And that's exactly what it is that you're seeing here on this right-hand side. We started to do something called CDSs, and I'll show you those when we get back out of the breakout rooms in just a few moments. And the CDSs are a competency-based scenario that they would do with a pilot mentor to prevent exactly this fade drop out between the interventions. So we do them monthly. They do the Sim 6 monthly, we do the CDSs monthly. It's making a huge difference. So if we could flatline that skill fade, because we see that skill fade in many organisations as well, get your training, you go off back into the real world, you don't get another training event then for another 6 or 12 months, for instance. Might even end up being mandatory training. We see it in a lot of organisations. My question to you is, and this is where I'd like you guys to go into a breakout room, and Nicola will sort those out for me in just a moment. Breakout room surprise, by the way, you don't know who you're going to be in with. And I know if you didn't want to go into a breakout room that you can put in at the very beginning, no breakout room, so that's fine. But the question here is, or have a discussion around that approach that we are taking. If you adopted a similar approach, what do you think it could achieve for your people? And what could that approach be? I'd be just interested to see what you're doing in your organisations to stop that dip. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to go and have a chat in your breakout rooms with your colleagues. There are only going to be 3 or 4 in there, so you've all got a voice. And I'd be just really interested when we get back to just pop some things into chat. And if then you're willing to open up your mics and have a chat, that would be awesome. Okay, I'll read out as many of these as I can. I mean, you can read them yourselves. It's just nice to kind of read them out. Martin says, having a regular follow-up between and after a coaching programme. Yeah, lovely. Come back to that in a second, actually, Martin. Esther saying the aviation programme is portable and transferable to other industries. Oh, yes, it certainly is. And we've started to recognise that. Certainly industries that have competencies as well. But yes. Marie's saying transferable. If there is a corporate intention to invest and embed it. Yeah, lovely. I mean, some of these are absolutely fantastic. Because I think also the other thing that we're looking at now, and leadership, how this links to leadership, and leadership competencies. Well, there isn't any. Well, if there is, I've never found them. And I don't know how many leadership programs down the years. And I got onto a conversation this morning on leadership on LinkedIn, and that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, keep your eyes peeled for that one, is all I've got to say. Martin's there saying use an app for daily reflection and check-ins. We're just about to get an app as well. It's something else that we're doing. So this is brilliant stuff. Use an app. See, I'm loving that. Martin, do you have an app that you do use for that? I'd love to know what that is, if you wouldn't mind opening up your mic.
Yeah, I started last September with an organization called Positive Intelligence. They're based in the West Coast of America, and they're trying to go global, and maybe other people know it. And it's basically, you have weekly pod meetings to discuss with a peer-to-peer group, and then you have daily reflections in the app, and it tries to get you 2 minutes every 3 hours, so it's like 3 times a day, just to reflect on the topic of the day. That's interesting.
Nice.
So if you Google Positive Intelligence, you'll see information.
Lovely. Would you mind popping that into chat for us? That would be awesome. Thank you, Martin. That's lovely. We've got Susanna saying we discussed the link between resilience building and showing vulnerability. Oh, Susanna, I can't pass that one up. Would you mind opening up your mic briefly for me and just tell me a little bit more? Oh, so important.
Hello, how are you, Sam?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for opening your mic.
Cheers from Barcelona, Spain.
Cheers from Cheshire in the UK.
Yeah, I was sharing with my team that I developed in 2017 a team coaching methodology called Skill EQ that I have registered here in Spain. And part of it is basically making sure that people understand, whether it's at C-level or a director with their own team, they understand that sharing your vulnerability is important, and not wearing a mask at work is important. Especially at C-level, it's almost like, in order to be professional, you seem to have to be always, top of your game, and that's just not possible. And not only through COVID, obviously, where everyone had, a lot of people had either someone that passed away in their family or near or friends. It's about it's difficult to build resilience if you don't. It's almost like I see a link if you don't show your vulnerability. And once you understand that being or showing yourself vulnerable is actually very, a strength, Then it's, and if you share that with your team members, in the case that I was referring to, one of them had an issue with a brother and also the mother. So this person was not being able to focus at work, and he wasn't being able to be, resilient with all, it's always a lot of change and transformation at work. So the other team members were almost like judging him, and because they were really not understanding, he wasn't really sharing. So in the methodology, in the second session, part of what we do is actually, sharing something that is, of private, like from ourselves, but not intimate, obviously, whatever you feel comfortable. Because really then people look at each other like, oh, okay, now I understand you better. Oh, I understand why Sam reacts this way. Oh, I understand why Susanna, takes some time to, analyze something. Oh, I know why she reacts this way in this situation. So they start to, know each other better, understand each other better. And that really helps them be at the same level and see themselves as human beings. So they then, not only their internal communication and relationships improve, they also can help each other, whether it's with resilience or any other skill or any other moment the person is going through. So by showing that vulnerability, and normally what I do is I start myself showing, telling them about some of the things from myself, so they see that I'm actually proud of them, and when maybe I failed or I thought I failed in the past, what I learned from it, and the benefit of that. And that's part of the first session, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. Some of the things that you were saying there, Susanna, and that human side really stood out to me, because this is exactly the part that we want to really focus our attention on here at Resilient Pilot. Because I don't know if you're aware, but if you have to get what's called a Class 1 medical to be a commercial pilot. And if you are having, let's just say, a mental health crisis, you lose your license instantly, immediately, goes. I don't know if you were aware of that. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So how can we support individuals to make sure that they are more resilient, more vulnerable, because vulnerability creates and generates trust, and actually are recognizing that self-awareness? How can they self-assess? How can we help them, coach and mentor them to prevent that mental health crisis so they don't lose their licenses? And we're not saying that we want individuals in the cockpit of an airliner if they are in that space. That is the absolute right thing to do, because they are not fit to fly that aircraft. However, it's about developing that resilience, like you've just said, and also understanding their own vulnerabilities and their own capabilities. And that's something also that we're just about to launch as well, called the Resilience Hub, where they can self-assess.
That's very interesting. That's also very, very linked with understanding, knowing, and developing one's emotional intelligence.
Massively.
Some people, probably also pilots too, people who are more like doctors or people in the IT industry, mainly men, that very often men are the ones in directors' positions, especially in those industries, more tech related or science related. And and some of them, they are, whether it's themselves suffering or their team members, and they're just not aware. So self-awareness is, like you say, the first step. If you are aware of what you're going through, or what's happening in your life, then you can start by doing something about it. So
absolutely,
in order for me to help them with this, self-knowledge, I actually always, before I start the team sessions, I send them an individual document that is confidential. I only get to see the answers. And then I use that information to facilitate conversations, right?
Yeah.
But always from the confidential perspective. And then people will start feeling comfortable about sharing things. And the basic exercise that I sent them with that document is a personal SWOT, and then I tell them how to do it, and I give them examples. And also always they have to use the feedback from other people that know them well from work and from home about, your strengths or the areas you are, better, and your weaknesses or areas that you need to develop, because that self-awareness makes them really think and reflect about, okay, and your SWOT today, it can be very different from last year or next year or 1 month from now. So self-awareness, I would say, and developing emotional intelligence, I guess, could help.
Huge, absolutely. Which is why we train our mentors around that recognition. What are they noticing from their mentees or coaches, for instance, that could indicate that there could be an issue, for instance. Well, we do have strategies and partners where we can direct individuals to. We have a company called CAP, that if we do recognise an amber or a red flag, for instance, we can direct them through to CAP specifically, which is the psychology for aviation professionals. And you know, we want these individuals back in the cockpit, but fully functioning. And it's really important because from a safety perspective, that's not questionable. We have to have that. So we need to make sure that we train our mentors to recognise those types of things. So that's a really great point. I don't know if anybody's, just to come on another point actually about confidentiality. Another thing that we find with a lot of aviation professionals is that they don't want to speak up because, well, I'm going to lose my licence instantly if I say something. So I don't want to say anything. So I'll bottle it all up. So from that confidentiality space, that's exactly what we can guarantee they will gain and get from our coaching and mentoring experiences. If we feel or we notice or they say something, we can direct them to CAP, for instance, and get the help that they need at that time. But everything is confidential, and that is one of the biggest things that people come to us and say that really helped them sort of talk through things before it got to that crisis point, which is superb. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the film Sully, just going off on a tangent now. That film Sully, where the pilot, absolutely, where he landed his plane in the Hudson. And towards the end of the film, when they are in the courtroom and they're trying to prove that he could have made it back to either one of the two airports. And he said, let's get real now. And he said, if you're going to make this simulation, you know, real, well, then let's make it human. And that, for me, is why Resilient Pilot is here. This is about bringing the human side of the aviator into the forefront, not just the technical stuff, not just, yeah, you could have made it back to the airport. Well, no, actually, I couldn't. And there's the reasons why. And that one line in that film, for me, gives me super goosebumps, because that's exactly why we're here. So let me just come back just very briefly, because I know we've got lots of messages here in chat and I can't go through them all now as much as I would love to. Having a combination of individual and group sessions to encourage accountability. Love this. There's some things about leadership in here. That program is for coaches. Oh, that's another thing there. Some amazing movie. Yeah, I've got a few things. It's a fantastic movie. And I think the way that that pilot conducts himself, he could have had a mental health crisis, but he was stoic, he was resilient, and he knew his stuff. And that's exactly what we want to make sure that all of our pilots that come through us, we can make sure that we keep them in that same place. Okay, let me go back to sharing my screen. Thank you for all of your thoughts and sharing in there as well. Absolutely fascinating stuff. How do we do this? How do we maintain that, not only the competency-based stuff, but also the human side, that self-awareness, that recognition of what it is that they are and aren't doing? Well, we have a program called the Resilience Development Program, and I mentioned about these CDSs before. That was the sawtooth effect. How do we maintain that? So we take that blend of coach, facilitation, and mentor and wrap it all the way up into these scenarios. And I've got a little snippet just to show you. But the three areas that we work on are confidence, competence, and connections. That confidence has been hit hugely on pilots when maybe they haven't flown for 18 months or 2 years, and all of a sudden they're back in that right-hand seat thinking, I've not flown an aircraft for 2 years. Yeah, I've just done my sim and I've passed it. But you know what? I'm not really feeling it. We're being really honest. That's what's going on. Not with all, obviously, but with some. So how do we develop that confidence to make sure that they are confident in their own abilities? And again, back to what do we notice? That competence, this is about the pilot competencies, and I'll share those with you in just a few moments. How do they demonstrate those? What about overconfidence? Oh, we see a lot of that and all. And that's something else that we can also challenge. and that connection. So that's about that networking element, you know, getting people back into the right jobs, etc., and having those networks around them that can support and help them. They don't just get one mentor when they come into Resilient Pilot. They can have multiple mentors. They may want a performance coach, for instance, and they may also want a pilot mentor as well. So how can we help support them back into the industry? So I'm just going to share with you now a live demo of these. It's only a few minutes, and what they actually look and how they sound as well. So we call them CDSs. We work them on a live platform, very similar to something called, oh gosh, Microsoft do like a flight sim type thing that you can get on your computer. Well, we kind of do a simulation of that. So I've got a video that I'm going to share with you now. Just stop that running. I've got a video that I'm going to share with you now. Stu is running the session with Matt. Matt is playing the role of the mentee. Stu is playing the role of the mentor, for instance. I'll just let it kind of run and play out. Let me just share the computer sound, because otherwise you won't be able to hear it. There we go, and I'll run it. I'll just let it run, like I've said, for just a few minutes. I'll just bring it back to the beginning. There we go.
Now, me and Matt are going to do a bit of role play here. So what we do is we have some software. We actually virtually put the pilots into the seat. Now, it's not quite like Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's more about the behaviors. So imagine you've got the two pilots. We've got one today. We've got me and Matt. I'll play the CBTI instructor. Matt's going to be the student, but he's playing the captain role. I'll play the first officer and everything else. And you'll see this blended approach of instruction, coaching, mentoring going on. And then we have a debrief at the end and use some software to actually objectively observe and record and classify and grade the performance of the pilot with that session. These are called competence development scenarios, basically virtual scenario-based training. Right, so this is our virtual scenario-based training. Now, me and Matt have been through this before, but essentially what we do is we have a brief with the pilots and we go through what the virtual scenario is all about today. In this case, it's going to be an aircraft coming into Gatwick in low visibility, which means fog, basically, which brings its challenges. And the idea is you're presented with a situation, a dilemma situation, where there is no real right or wrong answer. You've just got to go through a process of interacting as human beings, as professionals, communicating, prioritizing, time management, making decisions, and also being effective as a leader in this case, which Matt is going to show you. So what we do is, I mean, I'll skip through these screens. We basically give a bit of refresher knowledge for the pilots, because they may have been out of the loop for a little bit of time. And we then start the actual virtual scenario, which we're going to go through now. Cool. All right, so we're going to go through the scenario. So I'm going to play the instructor, but also the first officer, the master, the captain, and we'll go through the scenario and come up with a solution. It's going to be about 5 minutes, this. So observe the behaviours, observe the way that the instructor, myself, sort of coaches and interacts. So I'm just going to scrub the video. So this is coming into land at Gatwick, about 2,000 feet, and we'll just go near to the end. And myself and Matt, this is just a normal day, but something happens. Okay, Matt, what's just happened?
Okay, so looking at here, it's come up with a failure, and it's saying that we've lost engine 1, which we can see from our screen there on the left. And what we would do is we would back that up with some information. So if you look that the gauges on the left-hand side are showing less, so we would agree that it's not false information, we do have an engine failure.
Excellent. What's the priority then for this for us?
So our priority here is going to be obviously to fly the aircraft, which is always our first priority. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay then. So we've paused the scenario. So what sort of options have we got?
Well, I guess there's two options really. We could try and get the engine secured, so it's obviously broken, so we're not going to get it started again. But we could either try and get it fixed before we land, and continue the landing, or we can go around. There are two options.
Yeah. And what about the fuel here? Is that an issue at the minute?
We've got a little bit of extra fuel because we would normally be landing with maybe 2 tons, 2.2 tons in this point. So we've got about a ton extra, which is, given that it's foggy, is about normal. You'd take an extra a ton to allow for that.
Yeah.
So at this stage, I wouldn't say that we're in any sort of urgency. There's plenty of fat built into the system there. But we're pretty low, 600 feet. It's unrealistic that we'd probably get this fixed by the time we were going to land.
Exactly. So what's your feeling then? What's your
I would go around in this
go
one.
around?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Should we try that then?
Yeah.
Go around means, of course, that the aircraft discontinues the approach, and it's, in this case, we found it was safer to do so.
So that is just a very quick snapshot. And I know the sound wasn't brilliant there either, because it was a recording of a recording, as you could probably see from the GPS. But that's a snapshot of an hour's worth of CDS that we do. I like the problem scenarios coupled with solution finding discussions, immediate feedback, and also pre-solutions coupled with experiential implementation. Oh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Well, you're absolutely right there, Esther. Absolutely, because that's exactly what we want to do. We want that individual to think. We want them to start to really apply not only the technical skills, but also the non-technical behaviours as well. Because, yeah, flying an aircraft is incredibly technically driven. Of course it is. But what about that human side, like we said before? How can you be running at optimum performance if you've got stuff going on? So that's what we focus on. So that's just a very, very quick snapshot of what it is that we do. So any other thoughts on that? Just quickly pop into chat. That's kind of like a little bit of a look inside of the sort of things that just one of the things that we're doing here. I'm a little bit confused by what you mean by resilience. It's about recognizing that it's about self-awareness, isn't it? Again, just like we said before, that resilience development, actually, if we allow things to get on top of us, that can impact us massively, not just at work, that can be all of the way around. So it's about that personal resilience development. Really like the ability to pause and reflect. Yeah, how do you deal with the stress and crisis management? So we do startle and surprise. So that is because I've got the EMCC on the screen. That's one of the CDSs that we do as well. How do we manage startle and surprise? Because you may be flying along on autopilot and then also all of a sudden you get an unexpected event. So how do you manage that? How do you keep yourself calm? Look at how Sully managed that in that film, what we just mentioned just a few moments ago. So yeah, that's one of the massive things that we really do focus on as well. You've got to be cool, calm and collected. And that's all about resilience building. Situations such as great pace for the experiential learning, how to continue to bring that to the leaders, company and organisations. Yeah, definitely. I love this. Some great quotes on here as well. So keep those coming, but let me just continue. What I want to know is why did we choose the EMCC for what it was that we were doing? It's quite an interesting question, really, because there's many different other providers out there, but I felt, well, the mentoring and coaching council straight away just did what it was that we needed to do. That's why I chose them when I was writing my Coaching with Purpose program, because you may be in a conversation where mentoring could become applicable, and we didn't want to limit ourselves by just taking a purist coaching approach, and that was why we chose the EMCC. But I wonder if anybody could name what is the first of the 8 EMCC competencies, and a chocolate mouse for the first person to put it in to chat. Self-awareness. Oh, very close, Andrew. I'll bring them onto the screen. It's understanding self. which is exactly what we've just been talking about. One of the biggest things that we develop is about that individual recognising how their behaviours are helpful or hindering, for instance, or their mindset or whatever it is. And that's one of the biggest things that we do. Commitment to self-development. Look at what we're doing. The whole programme is written around these. And I'm not going to go through each of them. For those of you that are familiar with the EMCC competencies, you can grab them off the website anyway. But the whole thing virtually that you've kind of just sort of watched there, they do contracts at the very beginning of the CDSs. How do we want to work together? How does it build relationships? Because that's mentor to mentee relationship as well. Insight and learning, action and outcome orientation, models and techniques and evaluation. Do you know the whole thing was just in what it is that you've just seen? And that's just one tiny facet of what it is that we're doing. But the pilot competencies, the IATA pilot competencies, don't want to get too technical here, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We started to recognise actually there was a lot of correlation with the EMCC competencies and the pilot competencies. So me and Stu sat down and mapped them. And again, I'm not going to go into any detail, but when we start to recognise actually that correlation, we can start to see just how powerful it is, a combination of what it is that we're doing. So that was the understanding self, that was the first competency. But actually, when we start to look at the whole thing, IATA is the International Airline Transport Association. And they are one of the governing bodies of aviation, global aviation. And these are the standards that they set, and they link beautifully with the EMCC. So it just fit perfectly. Thank you, Nicola. Wonderful. So the ISMCC MCP framework, that's a mouthful, assessment framework. It supported us massively in recognising what it is that we wanted to do and how we wanted to achieve it whilst we were going through the accreditation process. Now, the framework, and I think there's an ISMCP holder as well, but I may be wrong, in the audience today. This is the 6 competencies that we need to achieve as an organisation to attain the ISMCP accreditation. Now, we attained gold. We were blown away. It took us like 2 years. We'd only been going and we achieved the gold standard. But that clarity of purpose, well, what was our vision? Where did we want to go? We had a really clear vision. That stakeholder training and briefing, that was already in place. We were already starting to do that from a consistency perspective. Process for selection and matching, we're literally just changing that right now. It was such a laborious process before from an admin side. We've now just started to automate that. Process for management and review. This is something that we do. The MRD stands for mentor reflection and development. So as accredited coaches and mentors, you need to have regular supervision. Well, how were we maintaining the standards for that? Well, that was what we did. We did an internal MRD session, the mentor reflection and development. Really important to make sure not only the well-being of our mentees and coaches were being looked after, but so were our mentors and coaches. High standards of ethics. So we had things like the Volunteer Charter, the Global Code of Ethics, etc. And of course, that administration and support. We even had some Kickstarters that helped us with the admin right at the very beginning. So we had some Kickstarters from the programme. I was going to put you into a breakout room, but I've just realised it's 11:15. Wow, it's gone really quickly. The ISMCP framework, that framework that I've kind of just mentioned, I can flip back onto it. How do you think that, whether you go through the assessment or not, it's not actually about that. How do you think that could help your organisation or an organisation that you work with? And if I just flick back to there, so it's those 6 headings there: clarity of purpose, stakeholder training and briefing. Even if you talk about things like leadership, for instance, which I, as you well know, if you know me, I'm mega passionate about leadership. All of this just sits under so many different areas. What's your thoughts? How could the ISMCP support your organisation? Not about getting the accreditation, but just those principles. Did you know the average leader gets a leadership role at the age of 32, but no formal training until the age of 43? They're in charge of the most important asset in an organisation for 11 years on average. Just doing what they think's right. It's a great process, even if you're not going for ISMCP. Absolutely, Nicola. So everyone pulling in the same direction. Brilliant. Without purpose, there is no motivation. Oh, 100%. 100%. Anything else? What about the others? How do you maintain high standards and ethics in an organisation? How do you do that? 11 years in a leadership role, but no, yeah, training and development on average, yeah. That's just, you're in charge of the most important asset in an organisation. Would you put a pilot in a cockpit with no training for 11 years? No. And yet we do it with people. Bonkers. Could potentially argue it's just as important. Okay. There's a few bits and pieces in there. I'll leave those just for the purposes of time. Like I say, I was going to put you into breakout rooms, but using the process surveys, etc., to find blind spots. Lovely. What you don't know but should know about what's going on. Lovely, Eileen. That's a really great point, because I think sometimes it's what's under that surface, isn't it? Because what's really under the surface of the aviation side is people don't speak up because they'll lose the license. And we know that. We know that that happens. So absolutely. Not just working in the programme, but also on the programme. Love that. Looks like a strategy for implementation and change. It's a way of selling and gaining buy-in from senior leaders. Lovely. So there's many different organisations that this would sit with. So let me just jump forwards in regards to what it is that we have learned. Not only going through the ISMCP process, but just this last, well, it's nearly 3 years now, because May is our 3rd birthday. So if we look at the 8 competencies from the EMCC, that understanding self, we recognise that we had a volunteer workforce. How did that really look? How was that going to really work? Like I said, some mentors came, some mentors, kind of went. IP challenges, we had people developing things, etc. Where did all of that sit? So we had so many different things to kind of look at exactly what it really meant for all of us. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these. Building the relationship, managing, diverging visions, for instance, because we had so many people that wanted to input. Well, how could we build those relationships? And of course, you talked about vulnerability before. We recognise that some people also weren't in a great place. During lockdown, they just lost the job. All of a sudden, their whole life had turned upside down. Well, how did we manage those people as well? But to make sure, that they were gaining what they needed personally from us as Resilient Pilot, but also their need and want to kind of get involved as well. That evaluation we did, which I'm going to share a couple of bits and pieces in just a moment about the evaluations. We had one guy who was doing a master's, because that's what you do when you're not flying a plane, apparently. He did some fantastic surveys and evaluations, which was fantastic, and it gave us some really great data in regards to what was going on for the mentees in Resilient Pilot and also for the mentors, and some of the data off the back of that I will also share as well. I had some data to share with you actually from the CDSs in regards to the uplift in performance over the last 8 months. But I haven't actually put it into this deck, but it has made a big improvement, 0.7 of an improvement, which is a huge improvement as well. So some of the data off the back of, it was actually Danny's survey. When we look at this here, the overall impact on mental health, bear in mind, this was anonymous from an industry that is fearful sometimes to speak up. So we can see here that very negative and negative impact on mental health, diet, fitness, social, sleep, flying confidence. Look at that, flying competence and your overall well-being. So we knew what we were doing was very much needed. I think Esther's put a question in the chat. How and who decided to use coaching concepts for those frameworks and apply them to aviation? We did, me and Stu, and some of the others as well. What was the process of integration? them into the programs? That's a huge question, can't answer that now. And I'm asking because I would like to transform higher education, specifically professional training, faced with multiple systemic challenges. Conversation for another day, Esther. Please feel free to share your details in chat and I will have a conversation with you. So when we look at that slide alone, boy, was there a need, and we knew there was, but that told us everything that we needed. In terms of mentoring, would you like to receive more or less, for instance? So actually, look, they were saying more. They want more of it. Once they recognise what it did for them and that it was confidential and they could have, we call them a thinking buddy. Oh, they were lapping it up. They just wanted more and more of it. So that, again, spoke everything. So how did we ensure that the mentors were a safe pair of hands? Well, I mentioned this before. This was MRD, the mentor reflection and development. And what we started to recognise also that there was themes in this as well, but we also linked it to the EMCC competencies. How was all this financed? So we got some funding from like things like the Department for Transport, for instance, and the DWP gave us some initial funding as well. But we're all volunteer-led. We're a not-for-profit organisation. So this was where a lot of this came from. But our time to create all of this has been given for free. There has been some remuneration for some things, but the vast majority of us all been just cracking on and doing what it is that we love and giving back to the industry. So that's how a lot of it has been financed. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but things like sort of managing the contract. Individuals were struggling a little bit. How do I contract really effectively? Well, what happens if something changes? What happens then? Yeah, absolutely. I like these questions as well. You know, how do we build rapport with an individual that we've just met on the other side of a screen? How do we do that? Some people didn't quite know what to do in regards to that. You know, that questioning technique, for instance, some people were still quite high directive style. Well, how do we change that as well? Or turn that round to be more favourable for like coaching approach, like we said. So all of this, we've used the Stoker's model as well for things like sort of models, a GROW model, all of lots of different things. Covey's circle of influence I use so much in regards to allowing individuals to sort of recognise their part that they play. So that's pretty much where we are. So what's next for Resilient Pilot? Well, one of the webinars that we did was on National Mentoring Day a couple of years ago now. And we asked the question, what is Resilient Pilot doing that we wish we were? And this is what they said that they wanted. They wanted more mentoring. They wanted more training. And when we kind of really asked this question, that was something that came out that kind of mirrored what it said slightly earlier as well in that other sort of survey that Danny had done. So we've kind of changed a little bit about what it is that we do. Not changed it in any great scheme, but it's kind of changed how it looks. So this is what we call our kind of, well-being model, shall we say. You've got the 3 C's along the top, the confidence, competence and connection. And we do the coaching and the mentoring for the first top 4 sections. And then when we look at the undesired states, for instance, where somebody isn't in a great place, that's where we send them to peer support and CAP. But we've also started to link that with the 9 pilot competencies as well, which we were doing naturally anyway, but it's just kind of weaved it in around that adaptive capacity. And what we're going to do in future, so the CDSs, Stu mentioned about a system which is evidence-based, which is quantum. So that's now giving us not only the assessor evaluation scores, but also when they assess themselves. So they have self-evaluation scores, and they're actually very similar. They're just slightly lower. People tend to self-assess less than the actual assessor does. So we've got the tech competencies, for instance, like we've just said. Got that resilience hub, which is just about to be released. Got far more networking. We're doing Pilots Career Live at the at Heathrow on the 22nd of April. We will be there with the Department of Transport as well. We're sharing a stand with them. And then, like I've said, we've got even more sort of CAP support coming on board and that EMCC monthly mentoring and coaching. And we do some upskilling in regards to that as well with our mentors monthly. So what are we doing next? This is the Next Gen Aviator. This is where we've been going into schools and colleges, and I've done a couple of these. These are just fantastic in regards to searching out those aviators, those geeks that just want to fly a plane or be in the aviation world, whatever that is. And we've been going into schools and colleges, like I said earlier. And we've got this funding, so answering your question in regards to sort of how's it all financed, we've just got some funding there from the DFT, and it's backed with the CAAI as well, who have also supported some funding for the government's Reach for the Sky initiative, which has been superb. There's a little QR code there on the screen as well, if anybody wants to zap that. And that will take you straight to our Next Gen Aviator page as well. I'm just conscious that I'm talking a little bit quicker here. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Susanna. We've been working very hard on this as well, and it's going down an absolute storm in schools. We set the classroom up, it looks like you're walking into an aircraft. So you've got like all of the windows, etc. We've got all the sort of cockpit stuff sort of up on the screen and all that type of stuff. They love it. They absolutely lap it up. They really do. They've been really enjoying it, and they get really involved as well. Sort of so many hands up. It's kind of like, you do you choose in the sort of class to kind of pull out from, and they then will be joining this program, which we haven't started getting them onto the program yet, but we will be doing as this year moves forwards. So I'm just conscious that I've talked quite a lot there. I want to do a little quiz time. Let's see how well you listened. We're going to win a flight to nowhere on Nothing Airlines. What do you want me to say? But it's just a little bit of fun. So you should now be seeing a quiz screen. Okay, so it only gives you 10 seconds as well to answer. So let's just see who did answer on that one. And it also tells us, so March 2020, we were born. So May 2020, absolutely, we were incorporated, but we were actually born in March 2020. So let's see who's on the leaderboard. Oh, we've got Martin straight in on the leaderboard. Nicola's third. Okay, so let's see the next question. How many mentors does Resilient Pilot currently have? Only got 1 second, that's it. Okay, that's close. So let's see. Oh, very, very close. 80% of you were right there. It was 70. That was quite correct. And let's see who's on the leaderboard now. Oh, we've got a few changes. Look at that. Martin's still up there, right at the top. So let's next question. What is the 4th EMCC competency? Everybody's now searching desperately on Google. Okay, that one's closed. So it was building the relationship. So well done to those of you that got that right. So let's see who's on the leaderboard. Martin is on the leaderboard still. Martin knocking it out of the park, but Sean is coming up right close behind you.
Martin's on fire.
Absolutely. So what are our 3 C's? I mentioned these quite a few times. Okay. So, oh, well done. Nearly everybody got that one right. 91% of you. Let's see what that's done to the leaderboard. Oh, Sean's took the lead. Sean's took the lead there. Is there any more questions? Yes, there is. There's one last question. I think this is the last one. So what does MRD stand for? I mentioned this a few times as well. There we go. That one's shut. Let's see who got this one right. Well done, everybody. 100% on that one. So in theory, that shouldn't have changed the leaderboard unless... Oh, there we go. Look at that. So Sean's first, Claire's second. Well done. Absolutely. And guest 57 is third. Just a little bit of fun. So Sean, you win a flight on Nothing Airlines to nowhere, I'm afraid. But nonetheless... Enjoy your flight. just a little bit of fun there for us just at the end, just to sort of see what you'd retain. So I know we're kind of running out of time a little bit. Well, we are running out of time because it's 11:33. I know there's 30 minutes of networking, but does anybody have... You're most welcome, Sean. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask me?
I've got one for you, Sam.
Go for it.
Just think about the dialogue that we've just had now, some of the questions that you've heard and some of the points made. What sticks in your mind from this session that we've just had?
Sticks in my mind?
Yeah.
The diversity of the responses from before about what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it, and just some really interesting comments. I saved the chat myself and I'm going to read back through them because I didn't get a chance to really look at all of them. But yeah, that's what kind of sticks in my mind, and the passion for people. And I think that's why we're all here.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been brilliant to hear about the journey of Resilient Pilot and where you've been and also where you're going as well, and some of the, I think, the deep reflection we've all been having about how we can apply your learning to what we're doing as well. And maybe it's just been a fantastic conversation. I think we're all going to be rewatching Sully this evening as well.
It's a great film.
No, thank you so much, Sam. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you.
You're most welcome.